Your voice, your opinion, your community. Fact TV, free speech protected.
Chris Roberts, and as we said before, that we're going to try to get into a couple of things that would probably irritate some people that would things that people wouldn't agree with, but that's what public access TV is about. We're here to provide information. We're not here to make a profit or stay in business in a way that other media outlets like. So the first thing we're going to talk about is politics, and politics not in a way of saying anti-Bush or anti-Trump, anti-Biden or whatever. I'm just going to talk about politics in the whole. I spent 12 years up in the New Hampshire State House. I was a committee chair for 2. I ran for the New Hampshire Senate from District 10, and I got my butt handed to me in the primary. I had ran for mayor of the city of Keene, and I lost by about a little bit more than 200 votes to a sitting incumbent. And so I have a kind of an insight to how politics works. And politics, when I first got into politics, I thought it was like the old Jimmy Stewart movie, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, where you could have ideas and you figure how you want to help out people. Well, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Mr. Smith was totally naive. His heart was in a good place. But as he later found out in the movie, he was sent to Washington to make money for a few people. And Mr. Smith had the moral courage not to do it, but to stand up for the people. And today we still have some people in politics who have the moral courage to do that. But the vast majority of them, probably 95% or higher, just get fed up and they quit. They try to find someplace else. Others go to Congress, the State House, with idealistic ideas, but they get beaten down and they say, hey, if you want to move, you got to go along. And if you go along, you get rewarded. If you don't go along, your own party will beat you up. And you go, no, that isn't the way it happens. Well, it does. Former President Carter, said politics was an oligarchy. And he goes, politics, quote him, politics is an oligarchy with unlimited political bribery. That's right, political bribery. Yes, I will admit that I've got a bunch of checks to support my campaign, and my largest was $2,000. But except for the $2,000 that went into the bank, and I just left it there, every single check that I've got from anybody or any organization, I still at home. And I've had a few organizations over the years say, hey, you know what? We need you to catch this check or return it so we can close our books. And I've never had. And so basically, New Hampshire State House is a little bit different because you can run for a state, be the state rep without having to depend on someone to give you money. Matter of fact, when I first decided to run for the State House, there was a member of the Democratic Party, a senior leadership position, asking me who authorized me to run for that position. And I kind of gave him the polite finger saying, I don't need your permission to run. But otherwise, let's look at it. We're talking about, if you're listening, is saying former President Trump is reaching out to wealthy donors to give him money. He's reaching out to wealthy donors that were supporting Nikki Haley. Now he's down in Florida talking DeSantis, trying to get DeSantis to say, hey, commit his donors to give to Trump. President Biden, the Democratic Party, do the same thing. The House and the Senate, they raise money. And if you want to, for example, if you wanted to go to get elected and get money from the House PAC, which was controlled by Nancy Pelosi, you had to kiss her ring. Same thing in the Chuck Schumer, or the same thing from Mitch McConnell on the Republican side. Unless you're unbelievably wealthy, you have to sell part of your soul to get the money, because no money is for free. According to New York Times, the average cost to run a Senate campaign and win is more than $10 million. Just think of that. $10 million for a position that would only pay you 1.2 over a 6-year term. Yeah, of course, for most people, that's not their money. But for the real wealthy, who may pay $30, $40, $50 million of their own money to run a campaign, well, these guys are really smart individuals and made a lot of money. But why would they be spending $30 million of their own money to get $1 million in return? It isn't about taking care of you and me. It's about taking care of themselves, and it's about taking care of their inner circle. Former President Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, between them on the 2016 election, they spent over $1 billion. Okay? $1 billion was spent for President Trump to narrowly beat Senator Clinton. Just think, $1 billion. And that money wasn't from you or I, but those are from big, wealthy donors. Hey, there was one with the 3 presidents. You had Clinton, you had Biden, you had Obama. New York City, a couple weeks ago, you could get your picture with them and get it autographed. All you had to do is give $125,000. For a lot of people in the country, that's 3 to 4 years worth of income working full time to get that amount of money. Okay? So when you see people taking pictures with the president and all things, those are not freebies. You got to pay for them. And, well, you're not really, quote unquote, legally paying for them. You're donating money to a campaign outside the legal limits. Or you go to Hollywood and pay $40,000 per plate, and you don't get much of a dinner on that, but you pay $40,000. So a couple goes, they pay $80,000, and maybe they throw in another $50,000 so they can get a picture with the president in between signing it to my dearest friends, Mr. and Mrs. Joe Below. And you can put it up on your office wall to make you feel really good. So just think. So between that would be $130,000. You know how many starving kids in the United States could be fed on $130,000 on a dinner that you could probably get at Lucas for maybe a couple $100? No, that's where the money comes from. And so, plain and simple, and then, I'm a venture capitalist or I'm a mega donor. I go to the newspaper, say New York Times, and say, I don't like how you've been writing about my candidate, so I'm going to pull all my advertising. What's the newspaper's number one priority? It's not to tell the truth. It's not to give both sides of the story. Its number one priority is to stay in business. It will do whatever it has to do to stay in business. So if I'm a big campaign donor and I spend millions of dollars on your and ads and stuff, and I decide I'm pulling out, the slant of the stories will change. I don't care if it's Fox News. I don't care if it's CNN, MSNBC, public radio. Their number one priority is to survive. The number two priority is me, if I'm the director, the president, the head editor, is make sure I get my paycheck every 2 weeks. Then we'll worry about the quality or the slant of the news. So and it doesn't matter, Democrat or Republican. The hypocritical part of it is, I can tell you that, talking to people in my 12 years in the State House and talking to some of the conferences and everything that I went to, there's an awful lot of hypocritical people there. They will vote the way they're directed to vote just so they can stay in their position. But when you take them to a side, their personal beliefs are totally different. Totally different. So it's kind of like, hey, why are you voting for the abortion? Well, I'm from a Republican area. And if I don't vote that way, I won't get elected or I won't get reelected. But what happens if that was your daughter? Would you think, oh yeah, I had some when we were talking some of the discussions in about abortion when I was in the State House, and saying, oh yeah, we know this doctor that will take care of this, who takes care of it, and he just writes it under a different code. Bingo, no problem at all. So abortions are being performed when quote unquote, but they don't come under the code. Or, no big deal, I'll just take my daughter and go to Massachusetts and take care of it. But what about the woman up in Berlin, the North Country, who maybe has 3 or 4 kids and she's financially stressed, or her and her husband are working and they accidentally get pregnant. Well, I really feel sorry for them, but they should have took birth control. It's their fault that they got pregnant and they don't have a right to kill the child because of their neglect. And it goes on, and it just goes back and forth. Or you go, hey, I don't want to pay, why do I have to pay the federal government this? Why do I have to pay 1.3% on Medicare money? Well, you can pay your whole lifetime and get one major illness, and whatever you paid your whole lifetime is wiped out. But I got to make sure we get these laws set right here so all my assets are taken care of, and so I don't have to pay the federal government any money if I have to go to nursing home and it's costing $12,000, $14,000 a month. Then the federal government, then the state government, who goes 50-50, can pick up the cost. I can't tell you how many people that I've ran into politics and worked with, they could care less about a whole bunch of stuff. They come to politics basically 1 or 2 trick pony, and as long as their ponies are being taken care of, they'll do whatever they are told. And so you can go and say, well, we're going to increase taxes. They talk a game, both sides talk a game, but they're going to make sure, even they might increase taxes here or there, but they're going to make sure they protect themselves. And so that's why everything is so divided. It's purposely divided because it looks like they're playing a game. They're really defending, the Republicans are defending the Republicans. No, they're defending themselves. And look at the members of Congress, what their assets were when they went into Congress and what their assets were when they left Congress. You go, no, it doesn't work. Well, I got to go to a number of conferences where, some of them paid the hotel rooms and they gave you meals and some stuff. Others, the state paid for some. And all you had to do was sit in a couple of little seminars. But you could sit there and you would listen to people. Oh, yeah, you hear about this stock? I'm going to buy this stock. I think I'm going to do this. And so much insider information is given that the average American person would not even come close to getting it, even if they had a good stockbroker. That's how a lot of these guys make their money, men and women. Because all they have to do is sit there and listen, and you don't get into a discussion, because then they could lie open to insider trading, but it's not against the law for you to overhear something. So, yeah, so these 2 lobbyists are talking to each other, and you just happen to be sitting next to them, and you're overhearing stuff. Bingo. That's how a lot of people in Congress and the Senate get wealthy. I even had the chance once to go down to Washington, D.C. on famous K Street. I went with them and onto K Street, and that's where all the lobbyists hang out. So they said, hey, come on. Come to this cigar shop. So we went into the cigar shop, and there was some thinly dressed young women. They were walking around the place with cigar boxes. And they would open a cigar box, and you would get your pick. Then they would go and say, hey, someone come, you need a drink? You need a drink? And you didn't have to pay anything. I was in that place with the Speaker of the New Hampshire House. These weren't cheap cigars. They were really expensive cigars, and they weren't cheap drinks. And there I was all I could do was listen and observe. I don't smoke, I don't drink. So it was easy. I couldn't be bought off by a $125 cigar or a $25 drink. And there was no limits, because they would say, hey, no problem, we'll just call you an Uber after it was over. That's how politics is played. Politics is dirty, and for politics, it isn't about you and me. All they worry about is our vote, and hopefully that we will give them some money. Okay? So do not be in awe of any politician. Do not trust any politician because he or she says, I'm a person of integrity, I got great leadership ability, I got this and this. Well, one thing that I learned in the Marine Corps, if you have to tell someone you got integrity, you don't have it. If you could tell someone you got leadership abilities, you don't have it. Because really, as my bosses are saying, are you trying to convince someone else, or are you trying to convince yourself? Or maybe you're trying to do both. Okay? If you have to depend on someone with your life, you don't want to tell them, I'm knowledgeable, I have integrity, and I have great leadership. It has to ooze out of you. It has to have that feeling, that sense, the person saying, yes, this is the person I want to follow. This is the person I want to trust with my future. And so now, and I would say, go back and look at your congressmen, your senators and stuff, your presidents, Democrat, Republican. Look back for the 20 or 30 years and say, this is what they promised, and ask yourself, how have they really improved your life, your quality of life? If you take the time, you'll probably realize they really haven't improved your quality of life. And what I have one right here. It says, the recent one, 1/3 of all wealth, not earnings, forget about earnings, it's wealth. There's football players who make $10 million a year, but that's income, but they retire broke, or they're broke in a couple of years because they don't have any wealth. The guy from Amazon, the guy from Microsoft, the guy from Tesla, they don't get paid a lot of money, but they have wealth. Their wealth is in the stock. And so, of all the wealth in the country, 1/3 of all that wealth is owned by 1% of the people. So, excuse me, in the last 30 plus years, basically 80% of the American people, when you use constant 1973 dollars, have far less wealth than they did when their parents were graduating from high school and college back in the 70s. You may have greater income because of inflation and everything. You may, quote unquote, have greater wealth in 2024 dollars, but you don't have greater wealth than your parents did when they were, like I said, graduating from high school and college in the 70s. So ask yourself, are you happy? Do you feel secure? Do you feel trusting of your state and federal politicians? That's a good question to answer because they control your future. They control the quality of the nursing home that you're going to be in. If they don't want to pay money to the nursing home, you're going to be in a warehouse nursing home. Plain and simple. Now we'll move on to a little contentious thing. Protests on college campuses. Okay? As of today, there's over 300 campuses that are having protests. Okay? Netanyahu calls these protests anti-Semitic mobs are taking our over universities. What's happening in American college campuses is horrific. It's inconceivable. It has to be stopped. It has to be condemned, and condemned unequivocally. That's what the Prime Minister of Israel has stated. Okay? A bunch of donors to a lot of these colleges have said, you know what, if you don't expel this person or you don't stop this, I'm not giving my millions and millions of dollars to your college. Newspapers, media are kind of balancing on because they're saying, well, you know, if you write the story from a different slant, I'm not advertising. I'm pulling advertising from your paper. Companies are going, what am I going to do? Well, McDonald's went and said, holy crap, we're in the problem. So McDonald's went and bought over 200 McDonald's from Israeli owners in Israel. Because they, quote unquote, because it was going to be a bad for business move. So some people are saying, well, these college students, they don't know what's going on. They're pretty naive, and there's outside agitators just causing them to do it. These college graduates, college students are puppets on a string. And it's going, others are saying, yep, this is anti-Semitic. Others are saying this is Islamic phobic. There's so, listening to it, there's so many things going on. But, you know, if you read between it or you read off, when a bunch of the college students are saying they're pro-Palestinian and pro-Hamas is two different things. And the part is being over 20 years in military, knowing land of warfare and international war, because war has its own legalities and everything. The without question, the October 7th attack by Hamas, the killing and the raping and other things, was a total unethical, immoral, illegal act. Plain and simple. The people that did it should be captured and should be put up for war crimes and suffer the consequences of anyone else who commits war crimes. No different than, I can't pronounce the guy's name, from Serbia that was killing men, women, and children indiscriminately in Kosovo in the 1990s. War criminals. But yeah, are some of the students pro-Hamas? Without question, pro-Hamas. Is Hamas a terrorist group? Yes, without question, Hamas is a terrorist group. But also, okay, when you go and talk to some of the other ones, what they're saying is they're not talking about Hamas, they're talking about a ceasefire. They are upset, like a lot of people are upset, because so far, right now, roughly, there's been about 35,000, depending on whatever number you use. But over 20,000 of the people that have been killed by Israelis and by Hamas, people that have been caught in the crossfire, are women and children. Young children, babies, pregnant women. That is what a number of the students are protesting against. They want a ceasefire, and they want Israel to sit down and let's work this thing out. They want their schools to diverse from companies that support the support and provide weapons and make money by providing services and equipment and material to Israelis military. But that's the big thing too, is they want a ceasefire and they want it to diverse. And they go, well, most people don't remember. We had a bunch of student protests like this a few decades ago, telling these universities, telling these corporations to divest in anything that was making them a profit or supporting the South African government and its apartheid system. Okay, so this isn't the first time something like this has happened. This isn't the first time the police and stuff are going in. Let's look at some of the other student protests. Civil rights. Our Jonathan Daniels was one of the persons that was killed. Got killed protecting a little black girl. The 60s and 70s anti-war protests. 4 kids getting killed in Kent State. And so United States has a pretty big history. Civil rights, anti-war, anti-apartheid, and now going for a ceasefire. And every single time the dominant power instructor fought back with police and sometimes National Guard. And what we're having right now is a call for the president to put National Guard members on these campuses. And if you look through history, every single time it ended up being a transition in leadership in this country. And so we had, there was a vote in the House 2 days ago that basically was 320 to 90. 21 Republicans and 70 Democrats voted against it, which basically would make, you would almost have to be working on pins and needles because almost everything you say could be considered anti-Semitic by someone else. That would have nothing to do with your intention. It would have to do with how the other person perceives it. So as we're going along, when people forget, and the other part is what Netanyahu never wanted the two-state solution that was agreed to in the 1970s by Egypt, Israel, and Jimmy Carter. And he's an ultra-right conservative, didn't want it. And so what happened, Alpha, he was basically, the PLO was exiled to Libya and stuff so everything could be working. But what happened was, as every time we would get closer, they would have some other issues. Because there's some people in Israel that want to take over the whole area, West Bank and Gaza Strip. So what happened is, if you look at it, Netanyahu and Hamas hate each other so bad, but they understand the importance of each other. Because as long as Hamas is there, Netanyahu stays in power. As long as Netanyahu's in power, Hamas stays in a strong position. So they have a symbiotic relationship, and so it benefits both leadership. So I was reading one of them. It was something like, I forget to write it. Only about 15% of the Palestinians support Hamas and their leadership. But it was something like 80+% support Hamas attacking Israel. And so Hamas knows if it wants to stay in power, it has to attack Israel because the vast majority of the Palestinians don't like their leadership. Netanyahu, with a lot of his personal problems and bribery, possibly trying to change the Israeli Supreme Court so he could not be tried for some of the conditions he's been indicted on, understands as long as Hamas attacks Israel or looks like it's going to attack Israel, he gets to stay in power because he's the strong man who is going to defend Israel. And so when it looked like Netanyahu was going to lose the premiership, Hamas started firing rockets and stuff And then it was then Netanyahu said the other group, the centrists, they weren't going to defend Israel and all that kind of stuff. So it worked. So right now, Hamas is on one side, where it looks like its leader is still in the comfort of, I think it's Qatar or Qatar, I can't pronounce, I'm not sure which one. One of them, he's living it nice and good because he's in a leadership position. He's failing to show leadership by leading his forces or whatever in the battle zone. He's going, hey, buddy, die, die, die. Who cares if Israel kills all of you? Because we're creating more people that are going to hate Israel, and I'm living in the lap of luxury. He's no leader. As far as I'm concerned, he's a coward. He's using people, and he could care less of the 20+ thousand men and women that are that have been killed. He could care less of the tens of thousands that lives are going to be destroyed by malnutrition, will die of starvation, will die of disease and everything. And he'll come across, please, please, please help me. Look what the Israelis done. Okay. Basically, this has really come down to two guys who are doing their best to cling on to power. And there's a lot of innocent people on both sides suffering the consequences. And so this isn't being anti-Semitic. This isn't doing this. This is about people. This is about men and women and children, elderly, non-combatants that are getting killed on both sides because of two men's so grip, they're afraid to let their fingers slip off the control or the lever of power. Plain and simple. You know, the kids on campus are yelling pro-Hamas, pro-Hamas. There's no doubt in my mind. They're either misguided or, yes, they are plants. There is a difference between being pro-Hamas and pro-Palestinian. Yes, it's like that diagram in math class, two big circles, and where they overlap that little piece. Yes, some Palestinians are pro-Hamas. They join Hamas, they get the benefits of being in Hamas. But just because you have a group, it would be like, let's look at the American Civil War. When you look at the people that owned slaves down south, okay, that was a small group. So to go in and say, well, you know, everybody in the South supported slavery. Wrong. Everybody in the South supported going to war over slavery. Everybody in the South supported war over states' rights. Okay, those answers are no, no, and no. Not every Palestinian, we can't blanket label this. Okay? We can't. The Americans suffered a bad price. Thing was, wait a minute, We knew what was happening in Nazi Germany, and we refuse to take a lot of Jews into the United States. We sent them to the Middle East. England didn't like the Jews. They sent them to the Middle East. We told our students, why did we stay quiet when all these innocent people were getting killed? So right now, we have a lot of innocent people getting killed. We have a lot of innocent people with the immigration and all this all over the country, basically all over Europe, all over the United States. A lot of this is a result of our intervention into other people's affairs. And because Iran isn't better off, Iraq isn't better off, Syria is not better off, I could go on and on. Colombia is not better off, El Salvador is not better off, Guatemala is not better off. All the different countries that we have gone into military intervention. Okay? Now, a lot of it we caused, but right now the majority, I would say the majority of the students that are protesting against innocent non-combatants getting killed, and they want to cease fire. They are not pro-Hamas. So do not collect them all together like saying every Southerner in the 1850s supported slavery. Every Southerner in the 1860s wanted to go to war. So it's important that we think for ourselves. And, okay. Last week I was, we talked about the government debt and stuff. Wait, okay, here it is. And we were talking about who's going to pay for our debt. I read an article that said that the Secretary of Treasury, Janet Yellen, asked China to buy $400 billion worth of our debt. And China gave her a finger. China saying, not our problem, not our problem. And it's like, oh man, what are we going to do? Okay, this hasn't been updated. I don't have all of last year's. But this was basically $3 trillion at the end of 2022, when the debt was 31.3. Today it's 34.7. But when we go and say, hey, debt doesn't really hurting us, 12 trillion of the American debt, the bonds and everything, is owned by mutual fund, pension funds, banks, and insurance companies. What happens if your insurance company makes the wrong bet and goes under? Oh yeah, what happens if the thing goes down and the New Hampshire retirement system goes, oh, and by law we got to make up. So they say, well, instead of paying 7% of towards it, we'll say, oh yeah, people who work on teachers, you have to come up with 10% instead of 7%, and taxpayers, you have to come up with 10% to 7% to keep it solvable. Oh, your mutual funds, you plan on retiring your mutual funds, but oh, your mutual fund just took a 2008 or a pandemic hit. Sorry about your retirement. $6 trillion is owned by the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve bought all this money up. Now, the Federal Reserve bought that at, say, 0.25%. And the banks that make up the Federal Reserve is, why do we want to hold this at 0.25% where we can sell, get rid of all this and buy it back and get 5%? 7%, $7 trillion is owed to U.S. agencies and trusts. Social Security Trust Fund, the Military Retirement Fund, and the Medicare Fund. So what Uncle Sam is doing is, holy crap. So if we can't get people to buy our money, we will then take this money that we owe and give an IOU to Social Security, to military retirement and Medicare, and then, so they'll get their 5%. But it has to keep going on and on. $7 trillion has been by foreign holders, which is 50% owned by foreign official accounts, central banks, and 50% by foreign investors. So you go in, which means 80% of the U.S. debt right now is owned by Americans. Only 20% of our debt has been purchased by foreigners. And it's going down. For example, remember end of last year, a bunch of banks closed. Banks raised their bond holdings from $1 trillion in 2008 to $5 trillion in 2002. Okay, then it was a combination of the savings and loans, where the savings and loans gave all these 30-year mortgages back then at 3%. Say, hey, no big deal. Or gave the mortgages, okay, say, oh, we're going to give the mortgages at 6% and we're going to give you 5% on your savings account. So the banks knew they would be getting 5% paying out for that 5, and then they could turn around and sell it at 6% mortgages. Well, what happened was the interest rate went up to 12%, a CD went up 12%. So hundreds of banks failed because they lost all kinds of money. Well, as interest rates rose, unrealized losses reached $620 billion in the fourth quarter of 2022, and basically whatever capital, and it ate into a lot of the bank's capital. Well, for example, Silicon Valley Bank, the 16th largest bank in the United States, it had so much losses it no longer had any capital. And so, to give you a couple of examples, the Bank of Japan isn't buying any money. The Bank of Japan, since June 2021, Japan and Chinese central banks, the government banks, have sold off $564 billion of U.S. treasuries, $500 billion. If you read, China is buying gold. China used to be 1.2 trillion. It's down about 800 billion, and it's just buying gold. When it keeps, and gold, the price is going up, but It buys gold. It does not have to worry about the United States controlling it. Other banks are going and saying, nope, other are refusing to buy it because they saw what the United States did to Russia and some of the other countries. And give you real quick, except Japan is 1.1, China is less than 800 billion. United Kingdom is 750 billion. Luxembourg is almost 400 billion. It's a nice tax haven. Canada 340, Ireland 320, another tax haven. Switzerland almost 300 billion, another tax haven. Hong Kong 225 billion, another tax haven. And Cayman Islands. And so those are the people that are buying money. And look at this, for example, way down on the list of major ones. Saudi Arabia only has $127 billion in United States Treasury. Germany only has $100 million in United States Treasury. And so no one wants to buy our money. And if no one wants to buy our money, the only place that can buy our money is the Federal Reserve. And if the Federal Reserve keeps going up, interest rates can't go down. And as the cost of stuff goes up, that's inflation. The food is getting more and more expensive. The prices are going up, the sizes are going down, the quality of the food inside is going down. I bought some Eggos the other day, and they were smaller and some of the most bland ones. I told my wife to get rid of them. We fed them to the birds. But I don't want to spend $3 for some Eggos that I don't want to eat. Okay. Gas is up into the 370s right now. And so food, inflation, and rent, those are food, gas, and rent. And just think, air conditioning season hasn't even started yet. And so I figured I just want to give you people some enlightening news today. So that's all I have for this week, so I can see what I can dig up for next week. Goodbye.